comes the war on COVID. Now, the war on COVID is a step even further than the war on terror, because it's no longer about protecting our way of life, it's about protecting our very life itself, our physical lives, our health. So you can see how the temperature is ratcheted up in the war on COVID.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are so lucky to be here today with, I like to call him Maajid Nawaz, but it's Maajid Nawaz, and he is an expert on geopolitics. He spoke at the Bath conference for the Better Way. Everybody was captivated. This guy does not hold back. He has an insight into the geopolitics that a lot of people refer to him for, that expertise to see what's going on. And he spoke this weekend here in Vienna, just today on the Saturday. Thank you so much for joining us.
Of course.
Yes.
Pleasure.
Excellent. So I have a big question. A lot of people don't seem to understand, and they think maybe it's too far to say it, but we are in an invisible war.
Well, the correct term is hybrid war. Mm-hmm. And what that means is hybrid war is a combination of everything. So emotional, spiritual, physical, financial or economic, and mental. So we can see that, the physical components of it. We know that there are zones on the planet that are hot. And when I say zones, what do those zones have to do with us? Well, they're connected. So take Ukraine. Of course, our own governments are directly involved in that war. So there's an example of a hot war. And we don't get involved in hot wars for moral reasons. That's obviously the case. The state, when it comes to getting involved in wars, whether it's Iraq, Afghanistan, now Ukraine, the moral reasons are often used by media propaganda to convince people that it's a good thing to do. But the real politique terms, the real reason to be involved in a war is rarely because the people making those decisions want to do the right thing. And the case in point is Iraq. The weapons of mass destruction simply weren't there. So that's an example of hot wars. But beyond that, of course, there is the psychological onslaught against the civilian population within our countries. We know that for a fact. Because if, for example, in the UK where I'm from, we have this SAGE Council, which was primarily comprised of behavioral psychologists. In fact, Professor Susan Michie, who was on that council, they're the ones that advised on the COVID mandates being imposed. It's no secret, it's something people can search online. She had been a member of the Communist Party for over 40 years and is a behavioral psychologist and was one of the most loudest advocates for these COVID mandates in the United Kingdom. So you've got behavioral psychologists, and the other thing that is minuted in their meetings, saying that the government wasn't making the public scared enough. So if you're deploying psychology as a weapon to make the public scared in order to get them to do what you as a state want them to do, that's an example of the abuse of psychology to serve this purpose. So that's why it's a hybrid war, has its physical component, kinetic component, as they talk about in the military, and its non-kinetic component. And the non-kinetic component is even within our own countries. The financial system, its crash, its purported reform, the abolition of cash, the introduction of central banking, digital currencies, all of this is connected. And it's not connected by me, it's connected by the people doing it. They're the ones who have connected all of this. They've pretty much told us that this is what they want to do. They want to obliterate and remove cash from the economy. They've told us, as I said, that they were using behavioral psychology to encourage the public to impose these mandates. So that's what I mean by a hybrid war. It's all-encompassing. And unfortunately, most people don't realize that we're in it. Of course, war has casualties. And part of the war here is to prevent people from realizing that there are casualties. Because we are the casualties. And if we realize that, of course, we wouldn't be participants in the war. And so if you look to the recent figures that have come from the Office for National Statistics in the United Kingdom, and these are figures looking at death rates, we find beyond a shadow of a doubt that those that were unvaccinated and those that were vaccinated, when we compared those two, we found that the unvaccinated lived longer and the vaccinated died faster immediately within the immediate period after they took the vaccine. And these figures were published officially on the ONS, Office for National Statistics website. Now, of course, some of those deaths would be maybe unrelated to the vaccine, but that's why we're comparing it to the unvaccinated. And you find that the rates of deaths immediately after the vaccine rolled out among the unvaccinated were consistently lower for all standardized age groups. I've written about this on my own Substack.
Where do they find your Substack?
It's called Radical with Maajid Nawaz on Substack. And the most recent article I published is on this point here. So this hybrid war even has deaths, mass death involved. And it's just unfortunate that part of the psychological operation that is being waged against us as citizens of these countries is that we are unable to recognize the true nature of this war.
All right, listen, I was going to ask you about how you got into this, but I think it's more prescient right now that we talk about who the perpetrators are, who is behind this hybrid war.
Yeah. Well, again, they've told us. So there's a man called Klaus Schwab, who is the head of the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum was ostensibly set up to reorganize the world's economies after World War II. And the interesting thing is that, as the name suggests, it's looking at reorganizing the world economy. And Klaus Schwab has published a book called The Great Reset. And of course, when COVID first hit, and again, this is something everybody can look up, the world leaders who spoke about COVID all had a slogan underneath them that said, "Build Back Better."
My Build Back Better economic agenda.
Build Back Better.
I commend your efforts, Mr. President, dear Joe, on Build Back Better.
Building back better means getting support to the most vulnerable while maintaining our momentum on reaching the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the SDGs.
So if you put those two things together, Klaus Schwab's book, The Great Reset, and the world leaders who, mind you, are graduates of Klaus Schwab's World Economic Forum, that we also know because he's boasted about it. He gave a speech at Harvard University in which he states very clearly, and this is a direct quote, that half of Canada's cabinet are graduates of the Young Leaders Program of the World Economic Forum, and he names Trudeau.
But what we are very proud of now is the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina, and so on, is that we penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and I know that half of this cabinet, or even more half of this cabinet, are actually young global leaders of the World Economic Forum.
He named Macron in France, and he continues to name a few others.
And I have to say, when I mention now names like Mrs. Merkel, even Vladimir Putin and so on, they all have been young global leaders of the World Economic Forum.
What this is essentially is a group of people that have graduated through the same program, that's a global program, who, as Klaus Schwab said in that Harvard speech, we have penetrated the cabinets. That's the direct quote. Obviously, that's strange wording. English isn't his first language, so I say infiltrated. They infiltrated these cabinets, and that's why you see that they all had the slogan, Build Back Better. But Build Back Better comes after the Great Reset. So you have to destroy before you build. The Great Reset part of it is the destruction. It's the controlled demolition through this hybrid war, not only of our economies, but of our own grip on normalcy and how we define being human in a normal context. That's what's being destroyed through the psychological onslaught, and the economy is part of it. That's being called the Great Reset. Now, to build back better, what are they telling us they want to do? Again, we go back to Klaus Schwab and his World Economic Forum. They have told us very clearly, and they've published all of this, and it's in his book, The Great Reset, it's in the speeches he gave, that they want to build back better, and what they mean by better is to use technology to form, to merge with humans, to form a kind of transhumanist moment, where efficiency is determined by artificial intelligence. That leaves no room any longer for human error nor human bias. But of course, what it also does is take out human compassion. And one of the, I believe, false prophets of this movement under Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum is a philosopher called Yuval Noah Harari. And Yuval Noah Harari has written a couple of books that are particularly relevant to this conversation. One is called Homo Sapiens and the other is Homo Deus. And in those books, in his own words, he says that there's a new religion. And the new religion, he says, he subscribes to. And this religion, he says, is called dataism. And the idea is that you aggregate a sufficient amount of data in its mass chunks of data, metadata, so that the AI can analyze this and make decisions on our behalf. Yuval Noah Harari, in multiple speeches, goes on to elaborate that he believes that most humans will become redundant because the machine can do everything for us. Just think going into an Amazon supermarket where it scans your face, you don't need to pay for anything, you pick up what you want, put it in the bag, walk out, it has all your data already, it's got your face, it sees what you've picked up, and it automatically charges your bank account. So in that example, and these are real examples, the cashier, the teller, is no longer relevant. So the human has been taken out of the equation. So that's what Yuval Noah Harari means by humans will become redundant. He does pose a solution in his framework of dataism, and he says the solution is, again, directly, this is what he said, computer games, and drugs.
And then the big political and economic question of the 21st century will be, what do we need humans for? Or at least, what do we need so many humans? At present, the best guess we have is keep them happy with drugs and computer games.
So the idea would be, imagine you put on a virtual reality headset.
And we call this the metaverse.
Keep taking your drugs, and you play these games. These games, by the way, it's not just to distract you, they're also collecting data based on human psychology and how you make decisions in whatever game you're playing. So whatever you do that's connected to the machine is always feeding the machine more information. And if you think about that, it will grow exponentially. But our brains won't grow exponentially in that way. So the idea for the dataist is that the AI becomes God. It then decides totally everything one. That's what I call technocracy. And technocracy that's built on transhumanism, the merger of man and machine. And that is what Yuval Noah Harari has explicitly advocated, and it's what he's advocated on the World Economic Forum platform, and it's what Klaus Schwab's book, The Great Reset, and other pamphlets published by the World Economic Forum are advocating. But to achieve this, which is if you think about it, and I mean this in a negative sense, it's revolutionary, because revolution can also mean positive. But here, in a negative sense, this is a revolutionary desire. To achieve this, you have to destroy the existing order to build back better. And that's the Great Reset. Yeah? Build back better towards what? Again, they tell us, a new world order. So that's what we're talking about. The new world order has been already declared by President Biden in a speech in which he pretty much said it openly a few months ago.
And now is a time when things are shifting. There's going to be a new world order out there. And we've got to lead it. And we've got to unite the rest of the free world in doing it.
We are headed towards a new world order. So that's their vision. Anyone watching this or listening to this, anyone holding on to what it means to remain human, I would suggest needs to oppose this vision with all means at their disposal.
There was a lovely line that you had, and the sentiment. I mean, I've heard so many doctors, scientists, and experts speak out during this COVID period where the virus, I don't think, is the problem. The virus is the stain in the human condition that allows people to perpetrate these things, and it's climaxed through COVID. You had a great line about how they want to make us one, but you put a nice subtle spin on it and the solution to go forward.
So what I've just described is a globalist political project, to homogenize human culture around the world under AI, so that we merge with the machine, and the AI pretty much sucks us dry by using us as nothing but a source of data. Culture will be no longer relevant. Faith will be no longer relevant. You are data. That's what Yuval Noah Harari calls dataism, and it's what he advocates. So what I said in reference to what you've asked me now is I said that the globalist political project is to make us all one. That is very different to what I'm advocating, because we are all one, but not that. Yeah. So it's the globalist political project to make us all one versus the spiritual project for oneness of being. Now, oneness of being is very different to all being one, yeah? And anyone that looks into spirituality will understand what I'm saying. On a Muslim context, anyone watching the show will know immediately if I'm referencing Ibn Arabi and his views around what he called Wahdat al-Wujud, which is translated as oneness of being, and his exegesis of the Quran in that light. But all faith traditions that go into the mystical side and the spiritual side have this approach. And so it's everything has a light side and a dark side. And what's happening here, as because of the progress of humanity, as we're all sitting here, I'm sitting in Vienna, I'm from the UK, my family's from Pakistan, talking to somebody who's sitting in Vienna, but it's from Canada, and your family's obviously from Korea, right? Yeah. So the fact we can have this conversation it indicates that the human species has progressed to a point where we are that socially mobile. And as I say, everything can be corrupted. That love through connection has the good side and the bad side. The bad side is what I'm calling the globalist political project. They would rather that I am no longer a product of multiple identities that I hold dear to me, but rather I ditch all of that to homogenize into this one multinational corporatist identity, dataism, under the AI, under technocracy, that we all become this bland, homogenous block. And that's what I call the globalist political project, so that we can all become one, to make us all one. A bit like in Star Trek, the Borg, if you ever watch sci-fi, yeah? And that Borg concept in Star Trek is very different to oneness of being. Nobody would use the phrase oneness of being to describe the Borg. They'd say the Borg wants us all to become one with it, to merge with it. But oneness of being is a spiritual phrase. And what that is to recognize that ultimately, if you go far deep enough, even on a quantum level, we are all vibration, we're all energy. Yeah? And so really, actually, there's the matter that appears to us on the plane that we look and see each other, perceive each other in, it appears we're separate and separated by our own physical selves. But obviously, if you dive deep enough on that, on a quantum level, we are all vibrating energy. Mm-hmm. And we are different compositions of the same vibrating energy. The quantum physicists might call that the force, or whatever they want to call it, yeah? It's the same energy that is eternal. And that energy, a religious person might want to call Allah, they might want to call it the source. Whatever word we want to use is irrelevant. And so if we can tap into that recognition that the life force, the same life force, runs through all of us and is us, we end up in a scenario where we're able to appreciate the connectedness to everything, and that we start looking at the other than us, not as an other. That whole paradigm of the subject-object is removed, and instead we realize that we are all part of the same experience. And that helps us have compassion, be connected, remain connected, and try and find truly that unity in being. And so I think that's very different to this forced homogenization that the globalist political project seeks. What they seek instead is to remove your personal experience and my personal experience, homogenize our experience under the guise of efficiency for the purposes of data. And what the purpose of that gathering that data is so that we can end up becoming commodified for the purposes of power and profit. It's a very different paradigm. So I think that's what I'm trying to describe. And I think it's important that people recognize that we are in war. And I'm not speaking metaphorically. Well, that's why I said hybrid war. This is an actual war. I'm calling it a hybrid war because it's more than just the physical fighting. But this is not a metaphor. We're at war and people are dying.
You proposed a solution for this, and you described it on a T-shirt.
Yeah. Well, so I say that, so choose love. You sometimes see that on a T-shirt, but it's a deeper saying than people actually realize. So what I mean by choose love is that there are roughly 10% of the population that determine the direction that the human species take. And then the rest are looking to that 10% for that guidance. And there are reasons for that, and perhaps they don't have the privilege, the means to think beyond their immediate needs, if you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because they're hungry, they're poor, whatever the reasons. 10% of the population generally tend to determine the direction the population takes. Now that means that 10% see what the others don't see. When you see what others don't see, you're in a situation where you can either take advantage of them and exploit them, or you can choose love. And that's why I say it's a choice, because those who see what others don't see then have a choice to make about what to do with what they see. And half of us in that 10% choose to exploit the 90% for our own gain. That could be sexual, it could be material. So when you talk about sexual exploitation, but it could be financial, capitalist exploitation. But whatever the point there is, that in that 10%, there will be some who choose, due to a lack of an appreciation of oneness of being. Back to that phrase, right? If you don't see yourself as one with people, and as people are you and you are them, and we're all the same, then at that moment where you start seeing things that others don't, you will choose to exploit them because of a void within yourself. And then the other option is that you choose love. And so I gave this analogy from the classic Plato's cave example, where a man's sitting in a cave and another man's behind them with a torch, and the torch casts a shadow, and the man sitting in the cave only sees the shadow on the wall and thinks that's reality. They don't know there's a man behind them with a torch. Now, going back to the example of that 10% being divided by those who would exploit and those who would choose love, if I got up and turned around and realized there's a man behind me with a torch, I can either choose out of anger to attack that man and say, you've been deceiving me all my life. What I thought was real was you casting a shadow that was giving me nightmares. And in my rage, I murder that man. Or I get up and I turn that man around and I walk them out of the... By the way, once I've murdered them, I sit there in the cave. I've now got the torch. I'm still in the cave. So I haven't fixed my problem. I've killed someone and I'm in the cave still. And maybe my torch I've just taken off him is still casting shadows for other people. But if you turn that man around who's got that torch, so I turn around and see the torch, I walk with that person and say, come out of this cave with me. And then bring them out to the surface level and show them the sun. The torch has no power in front of the sun. And that's what I mean by choose love. We have to guide people and we have to show people, regardless of all of the trauma, we have to choose a better way. Because the only other thing that happens if you don't choose love is you perpetuate that cycle of violence and trauma.
I love it. Don't change the mindset, because it just continues chopping the snake off at the head.
Yeah.
Go with the heart, and this is how we change the world.
Absolutely. Where the heart leads, the mind can follow. That's actually a line from my autobiography called Radical, which I spoke about. My life story is a bit complicated. We won't go into it here. Yeah. But there's a line in there that where the heart leads, the mind can follow.
Maajid
Pleasure,
Nawaz,
sir.
thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Cheers.
All right.
All right. The US, England, Brazil, and now Vienna. We're traveling the world to bring you the experts. Please help Bright Light News continue shining a light on the truth, and donate today at brightlightnews.com or by e-transfer to gord@brightlightnews.com. We're 100% viewer funded by people like you. Thank you. Maajid Nawaz.
That's a good attempt.
Yeah.
It's the best way is think of magic as a word. Magic,
Okay.
Yeah? And then my name is Maajid with a D.
Maajid.
There's also Maajid. They're both names.
Okay.
Like Sarah and Sarah.
Okay.
They're both legitimate names.
Right.
But mine is Maajid.
Maajid, okay.
Maajid Nawaz.
Okay, Magic. I like that. Magic Nawaz.
Yeah.
I'm going to call you Magic. All right.